Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to our panelists, and thank you everyone who's on watching the summit today. It's been a great day of programming. So with that being said, we are going to get started. My name is Jose Melendres. I am with the UNLV School of Public Health, and I am your discussant for this afternoon. Thank you again. I will quickly introduce our theme and panelists, and then we will dive right in. So joining us on this panel today, closing the diversity opportunity gap in higher education, we have Dr. Mercedes Butler, who serves as the UNLV's College Opportunity Learning Concierge. In this role, she works closely with teams from enrollment, academic advising, and the Nevada system of higher education to ensure that students such as those in the MGM College Opportunity Program experience a smooth transition into college. Also joining us is Mr. Jaime Cruz, who serves as the Executive Director for Workforce Connections, Southern Nevada's local workforce development board. He was appointed to this position as Executive Director in October of 2017 and has served as the Chief Strategy Officer for 8 years and was instrumental in partnering with local libraries to expand the public workforce development system. Thank you, Jaime, for being here. Mr. Brian Mitchell leads the Nevada STEM Education and Workforce Development Programs as the Director in the Governor's Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology. In his role, Brian manages a $14 million workforce development grant program and has funded the creation of 52 new STEM post-secondary training programs in high demand career fields over the last 4 years. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Melody Rose, who started her tenure as the Chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education on September 1st of 2020. So welcome, Dr. Rose. Her previous leadership roles have included serving as the Chancellor of the Oregon University System, Portland State University's Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Introduction and Dean of Undergraduate Studies, and Chair of the Portland State University Division of Portland Science. So today's session, the panel discussion will identify national trends and closing opportunity gaps in higher education for diverse populations and explore the innovative ways in which Nevada is addressing the skills gap shortage while preparing students for the jobs of tomorrow. So with that being said, I would like to invite Dr. Rose, our Chancellor, to welcome and make opening comments and get us started. Dr. Rose.
Well, thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin by thanking UNLV and the College of Education for hosting this 6th annual summit on Nevada education, and thanks especially for including me in today's activities. I'm honored to be with all of you panelists and viewers. As the Chancellor for the Nevada System of Higher Education, I want to share how excited and proud I am of the work being done today to allow educators, policymakers, and community leaders the opportunity to share ideas, to confront head-on the challenges that we face, and to craft ways to improve Nevada's education systems. This session of the summit, Closing the Diversity Opportunity Gap in Higher Education, is a topic I am particularly passionate about. I believe Nevada has an enormous and vital opportunity to close the achievement gap in higher education among underserved and first-generation populations. One of the things that attracted me to the opportunity to lead NSHE is that Nevada's population today looks like the future of our nation. This state has been making inroads in matriculating increasingly diverse classes of students into our institutions who reflect the communities that they represent. However, we all know we still have work to do in turning opportunities into successful completions. I believe if we are laser focused with clear goals and measurable outcomes, Nevada could be among the top states in the nation closing the achievement gap. And that would allow us to be a model for other states. And it would be, for many of us in this field, the achievement of a lifetime. Thank you all, and I look forward to participating in this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and kick it off with our questions for the panelists. And there's no set order or set who, I'll leave it open to the panelists if you feel you want to respond to it. Raise your hand or speak up. So our first question: before the pandemic, communities of color, diversity, and equity face multiple challenges and inequities, including, just to name a few, poverty, housing, food insecurity. The COVID-19 has brought this to the forefront. Now, when we think about the perspective of higher education access, navigating the system, what policies or procedures have you looked at or would aid in supporting those students as they try to access and work through higher education in Nevada? And I would like to maybe target this to present this to Dr. Butler or to Dr. Rose.
I appreciate the question because, of course, we've all been observing sort of the confluence of a couple of really major challenges for our vulnerable populations. And not least of which, of course, is that COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting communities of color and lower income Americans nationwide. And when you see that compounded with some of the other challenges that these communities have historically faced, we really are confronted with a situation where we must act, and we must act decisively and with compassion. And so at the higher education level at NSHE, of course, you may have seen we've had a very robust conversation among our student population who came to us asking for some more flexibility in our grading system. And this is a conversation going on nationwide. Of course, it's not unique to Nevada. And ultimately, our presidents came together and decided to make a decision that, we needed to listen to our students, that they are hurting in a number of ways. And again, some institutionalized and historic racism is interacting with the COVID-19 virus, with economic inequalities and some educational barriers. And we simply made the decision that we needed to listen to our students on that front and provide more service and more flexibility in our grading system. I'll just finish and then turn things to my colleague. I'll just finish by saying that in addition to that, and in hearing the real cries for help from many of our students who are suffering through this pandemic, and by the way, doing a valiant job, I would argue, in resiliency and compliance with COVID requirements and so forth, and in taking care of themselves and their families. What was very, very clear to me is that students were telling me that they were suffering in terms of mental health disparities and challenges. So in the next few weeks, I will be announcing the composition of a system-wide mental health task force. And we'll be doing a listening tour, virtual, of course, across our state to hear from students directly in terms of what they need from us in really addressing some of the critical mental health challenges that have arisen out of all of the challenges that I just described. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Hello.
Rose. Dr. Butler?
Thank you. I want to just thank the College of Education for the opportunity to speak. Closing the opportunity gap and helping students graduate is a topic near and dear to my heart, and obviously those that are participating in the conference. I would just add in regards to some of the things that we're doing here at UNLV, it's being really intentional with the plan of actions that we've really been working on and having in place with the top tier initiatives. And so one of the successes is the COP, the College Opportunity Program. And my goal in working with the students is really to remove barriers and overly burdensome policies and procedures that might delay the graduation process. And although we're seeing a success with the program, I think that it is a window or a view to what other students of color are experiencing, especially given COVID-19 furloughs and layoffs that have plagued the state of Nevada.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. Brian, did you want to chime in on this one?
Thank you. And it's an honor to be here today. Thanks to UNLV for putting this on, and I'm really excited to share some of the things that we've been doing at the state level. And certainly topics like food and housing insecurity are top of mind during COVID-19, but it's heartbreaking that these same topics have been with us for quite some time. And so a few years ago, we at OSET funded a grant to the College of Southern Nevada to look at strategies to increase recruitment, retention, and completion rates of underrepresented students in STEM programs. And we wanted to take a look at both academic and non-academic barriers to completion. And so the non-academic ones were particularly intriguing to me. And just a couple of examples of some of the things that we funded that I think might be useful to other institutions in the state. We funded a grant for a student emergency fund, campus-wide food pantries, a clothing store, so that students could have professional clothing when they interview, or if they needed things like work boots or scrubs, they could find that there. And so these are some of the, some of the pilot programs that we've been engaging in. And we're working with the Office of Institutional Research to determine the efficacy of these programs and whether or not they have an impact on completion rates of students in STEM programs. And our hope is that for the ones that show real promise, that we'll be able to take that information, that data, up to state policymakers, college leaders, and so on, and say, if we really want to make a dent in completion rates, we should take a look at some of these strategies that have been proven successful right here in our own backyard. Hopefully, I think, we can, not let this crisis go to waste and see if we can understand what good ideas work and how we can replicate them throughout the state.
Thank you, Brian. Jaime, from your perspective in workforce development, what new policies or procedures have you all had to look at that would create or provide the population that you work with in preparing them for higher education?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to join my esteemed colleagues on this panel. I think just to add to what's been said before, us specifically as the local workforce development board, we formed a partnership with our local libraries to make sure that we could bring the services that we provide students to help prepare again for their careers post high school. This partnership has allowed us to be closer to where these students live and sometimes work. And so, for example, a couple of the East Las Vegas Library, right in the heart of the Hispanic community, and then the West Las Vegas Library, again, right in the heart of the African American community here. And so I think for us, being able to be closer to the neighborhoods has allowed better access. Of course, this pandemic changes everything, but that partnership has allowed us better access to those communities and be able to help them in their career post-secondary.
Thank you, Jaime. So my next question for folks, for the panel, UNLV, as well as I believe 4 of the other institutions in Nevada of the 7 who provide research and instruction, are now minority serving institutions and also designated as Hispanic serving institutions. So from your perspective, what opportunities or challenges do you believe this provides for Nevada in regards to serving our diverse and equity populations as far as MSIs and HSIs go?
I think UNLV is right on track. And it is a testament to our hard work that we do have those designations. I think what it does is it puts us in track and in line with accountability to make sure that we're serving the 65% of students of color that are attending UNLV or institutions here in the state of Nevada. I think with the top tier initiatives that you've heard the president and many leaders talk about throughout INCHE is the intentionality of really targeting these students of color and not this one, stop approach or one approach to all communities or students that make up that population, but really just being intentional and targeting and giving the funds directly to programs like the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice that sends out regular communication on how students of color can get involved on campus. And so I think one of the unintended consequences of COVID-19 is utilizing our programs and services and transferring them online, right? So that they're readily available for that intersectionality between workforce readiness and also career readiness as it pertains to students attending UNLV and for the state of Nevada.
If I
Thank
may
you.
just add on to what Dr. Butler has offered and give a bit of a system perspective, you're absolutely right. We're so proud of the HSI designation, and we rightly should be proud of this designation. But I would amplify that and just remind viewers that among our 7 degree granting institutions, we are a majority minority system. And that is something that we should be very proud of. It's one of the reasons I was attracted to this opportunity. And one of the things that I'm very focused on is thinking about how we can really increase our collective impact by working together. And in my short time here, I've already seen some of the HSI institutions win some federal grants because of their HSI component. And those are so critical because they help us with funding vital services that are culturally specific and that, you know, we know have a return on investment in moving the dial for completion for in particular our Black and Brown students. And one of the things I'm very much focused on in this upcoming year is how do we really scale some of those initiatives. You know, our campuses have programs that are working in closing the achievement gaps. For Latino students in particular, there has been progress. We have a long way to go with African-American students and males in particular, but we know some of the things that work. And so I'm really keen to bring people together to understand how do we take those programs that work and scale them system-wide. And one of the opportunities I think that we are going to have in the next biennium, as challenging as things are going to be on the state level, is I think we will be very well positioned for federal funding. And I'm very much looking forward to working with the Biden administration to identify places where all of our institutions can come together for grant writing opportunities to serve our communities of color. So I'm really trying to look at what works, what do we know is working, and let's find the money to scale it up.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. That actually is a great setup for my follow-up question on this. Dr. Luis Panwan, who's a national scholar, actually has visited the Nevada system of higher education and presented his research. And an area that he focuses on is on the issue of male success in higher education, especially male students of color. And so understanding the challenges that Dr. Rose just pointed out, and to any of our participant panelists, what, from the prospect of faculty, administrators, what do we need to be thinking about in serving those diversity and equity populations? What needs to be put in place from y'all's perspective, both in higher education and then of course in the workforce? Anybody please chime in that would like to start responding to that.
So, you know, we had the pleasure of speaking with both the chancellor as she started her new endeavor, and we're grateful to have her here in Nevada. And we also met with President Whitfield when he's just started. And one of the things that we're committed to is, again, closing that gap that we have currently with some of the higher ed institutions. We've already opened up better points of access for these brown and Black students at the CSN campuses. And we were talking to President Whitfield again about how can we strengthen that support from our system, from the public workforce development system and the one-stop resources, the millions of dollars that come to our state to, again, help students to post-secondary success. There's ways to strengthen that. And so there's some things on the way already happening again at CSN. And we hope that those things can be duplicated as well at UNLV and other schools.
Thank you, Jaime.
So I'll jump in. You know, it strikes me that we lose a lot of kids who have all the aptitude for post-secondary programs and great careers, but we lose a lot of them in that summer, that period of time, that summer after their senior year, where they have every intention of going to college, but they don't have the family supports or that college going culture to really understand how do you get from high school to college. And so one of the ideas that we're piloting right now, we've got 5 pilot programs across the state. We're calling them our STEM Workforce Pipeline Grant projects. And we want to try to create a more seamless transition from high school through post-secondary and into the workforce. And and really focusing in on that underrepresented student population that doesn't have all of the family supports that I enjoyed when I made that transition from high school to college. So we've got 5 pilot projects throughout the state, and we're working on creating different ideas about how do you start a program in high school and have a consortium that makes up a high school, a post-secondary institution, and then an employer, and create a program where students can start learning in high school and they continue learning a little bit after high school. And then at the end of the program, they receive an industry recognized credential that gets them on kind of that first rung of the ladder. And the important part of our program that I think, that we hope will help it to be successful is we've asked every employer partner, or we require them to provide an interview to every student that graduates. So then they're not necessarily going to get hired, but they'll at least get an interview. And that's really strengthened that employer post-secondary high school partnership. And so if we're able to, get kids, that first kind of entry level credential, there's research out there that suggests that as they want to move up the ladder in their job, they'll come back to school and they will be more motivated, or they'll have the understanding and the know-how to get higher credentials to help them kind of continue to progress in their careers.
Right. Thank you, Brian. To Dr. Rose or Dr. Butler, one of the points that Dr. Bahman presented in his research was institutions need to stop using one size fits all approach. Would you care to comment on that in terms of how we can work with faculty and staff to be prepared for, and obviously continues to be the diversity of our student populations in Nevada?
Well, in
Dr.
terms
Butler?
of that consideration of culturally specific programming, I'm completely in agreement. And I think it's been shown to work nationwide that when we really listen to students and their families about what they need, imagine that we hear what they need. And so I think that one of the keys is really talking with families and students prospectively and when they are matriculated. And the other thing that I'm very passionate about, I think I'm on my 95th day on the job, so still very new to the post. But one of the things that I'm very passionate about and I've been successful with in other jobs is thinking about equity in hiring and retention, because I think it's just a fact that you can't be what you can't see. And so I think one of the things we are going to be very focused on, the presidents and I, is our hiring and retention practices and initiatives. And I will give a shout out to the 8 institutional presidents in the NCHE institutions. I think we have one of the most diverse sets of presidents of any system in the nation. And I think that's, again, a point of pride and will advance this conversation. But we really need that representation to flow through every aspect of our institutions, so that students know that when they see themselves in an instructor, an advisor, not only do they have an affinity, a natural affinity, but they know that these are folks who have walked a similar path and are interested in their success. And I'm very excited to get to work on this question of how do we apply an equity lens to our hiring and retention practices so that we have really representation of our students in the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. Dr. Butler?
Yes, and just to follow up what Dr. Rose said, I think one of the things that we do correctly here at UNLV, and I think at the NCHE institution, is during orientation, we provide graduation course to the incoming class. And so the messaging from day one is degree completion. What's unique at UNLV is we're pretty steady with our retention numbers. We retain students the first 3 years, where nationally across the board we see research of that sophomore slump. There's something in particular happening with that fourth year when students are thinking or assuming that they are up for graduation. And so I think there's room and opportunity in these upcoming years to continue to partner across the state, across campus, nonprofits, CCSD, to focus in on areas that close that achievement gap. I know we're going to touch on the remediation of math and English and how that is connected to open up opportunities into STEM fields here locally in the community. And so I think we have an awesome team, and really the message that I've heard throughout the conference is that collaborative efficacy, how we each want to partner together to not just close that opportunity gap, but really see students graduate, achieve that degree, and then placed in a job or career that they see opportunity for a lifetime.
Thank you, Dr. Butler, for setting us up for the final question of this one. We have about 6 minutes left in this session before we go to question and answer. So talking about career pathways, we know that STEM, obviously science, technology, engineering, and math are huge. And there are multiple opportunities here for Nevada. So Brian, could you maybe, I know you mentioned a little bit of what you all are doing. Could you give us a quick insight into the STEM area for Nevada? And then I would ask our other panelists to kind of chime in where you see opportunities, understanding that traditionally minorities, communities of color have been underrepresented in the STEM fields. Brian, can you kick us off on that area and share with us a little bit about what's going on here?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So certainly STEM jobs are, prior to the pandemic, were growing 50% faster than non-STEM jobs, and they pay 50% better when you control for the amount of education the job requires. 50% of STEM jobs require a 4-year degree, and 50% require a 2-year degree or less. And so there's plenty of opportunity in the state across the spectrum of jobs. I'll let the rest of my colleagues weigh in on the kind of the, what's going on at the higher education level. But one thing that I really wanted to mention here, and I know this is a higher ed focused conference, but I'd like to just put in a plug for early STEM education that happens in elementary school. And I think there's a huge gap, or there's a shortage in students of color in STEM programs in higher ed. And I think the root cause of that is that many students of color and female students don't see themselves as or don't feel welcome in STEM starting in elementary school. And so they decide, in 4th and 5th grade that math and science and engineering isn't for them, and maybe it's because, to what Dr. Rose was saying earlier, they only see, white males as being, in STEM fields, or in STEM careers. And so I think, we'll never get the kind of numbers we need to in UNLV's computer science program or in their engineering program, if we can't convince, students that this is for them. And so I think we need to start early and build build programs in elementary, middle, and high school that build into the higher ed programs. And if we're successful in doing that, then I think we'll be successful as a region in having our STEM programs reflect what our population looks like.
Thank you, Brian. Any of our other panelists comment?
This is Jaime. I'll go next, Jose.
Yes, sir.
So I live in the flesh what it's like to, if you will, to be a Latino and raise a Latina doctor here in Las Vegas. Mine just graduated last May from UNLV. And I think what's important, what I've learned is STEM needs to start at home. Yes, there needs to be mechanisms out there because not every family has the same resources. But that's why I was mentioning earlier, it's important to bring the resources closer to where people live. And so we are, again, focused not just on making sure that the libraries are places where children of color can access STEM activities, STEM exposure, and again, opportunities to see people that look like them and those kinds of careers. but we're also partnering with CCSD to make sure that this labor market information gets there early enough too. Because sometimes, as Brian said, when they graduate, it's too late. You really have to, if you will, show them why that career, and the kids use this term now, that's not sexy. And so we got to show them why those careers are sexy early on. They have great rewarding careers in STEM, and they just don't know about them. So the last thing I'll say is with Clark County School District, also to Brian's earlier point, we're pushing hard to make sure that every student graduates at least with the with some sort of credential that's already meaningful in the workplace. And one that we're proud of is that we made Clark County the largest county in the nation to be certified as a work-ready community. And that's the goal, is that every high school student who's not already decided to go on to the four-year traditional higher education route graduates with a National Career Readiness Certificate. And as Brian said, can hopefully be a foundation by which they can build on to additional post-secondary success.
And before we wrap up and add it on to post-secondary success, I would like to just congratulate our first NGM COP graduate cohort out of urban leadership. They persisted from fall 2019 to fall 2020. So in 2 weeks, they'll be graduates. And it's just a testament of when all hands are on deck and we are moving those barriers out of the way for all students, but in particular students of color, the success that we can see in the midst of COVID-19, furloughs, layoff. These students still have the perseverance within that you see from communities of color to continue and persist through whatever is put in front of them. And so as we wrap up the session, I just want to give a big congratulations and round of applause to our up and coming COP graduating class.
Congratulations, everybody. Dr. Rose, any final comments in this area?
Well, I guess I would just say, in addition to the wonderful comments that the other panelists have offered here, that I've been reflecting some on the challenges in STEM for students of color as well as white women, and what the barriers are. And I think, I'm looking for a little bit of a mindset change in my industry, higher ed in general, because oftentimes when we see particular pockets of students struggle, we wonder, why are they failing? And the question really should be, how are we failing them? And so it's a shift of mindset, I think, and accountability that's really important to me. And one of the reasons I'm thinking about this a lot recently is that it's always been the case that degrees in some of the STEM fields, particularly in engineering schools, are frequently more expensive up front than degrees in, say, the humanities or the social sciences. And I've become increasingly concerned that those sticker prices are perhaps intimidating upfront to those underrepresented populations of students, even though, as Mr. Mitchell stated, we know that over the life of your career, they more than pay for themselves. So I've been really thinking a lot about this issue of sticker shock, and the inequities that perhaps follow. And I think it's incumbent upon leadership in my industry, again, nationwide, this is not a Nevada problem specifically, but we need to be thinking about what message are we sending? Are we doing sufficient financial literacy education for all underrepresented students so they can see the lifetime ROI of those degrees, even if they are initially more expensive? So more to come there, but I'm certainly researching this question because it concerns me.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. So we have about 6 minutes left, and there's some great questions in the question and answer section. So the first question addressed, because we are an MSI, both Hispanic Serving Institution and Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander institutions. I think several of our institutions are moving or hold those designations. From NSHE's perspective, and what can we do or what can be done to address the issue of data collection that is timely and up to, matching what's going on more current. So the question is, again, the question about data collection, culturally sensitive data that needs to be collected in order to support faculty and programming and all those types of things. Dr. Rose, you'd like to?
Yeah, I'm a big data nerd, and I think that we have the beginnings of some good data here in the state. In fact, superior to the data that I had about student performance in Oregon in my former role there. Much of that data is longitudinal in nature, and so one of the conversations that the superintendent of public instruction, statewide superintendent, and I have begun to look at is this question of longitudinal data and how do we make it more robust? How do we make it more accessible so that we can see the stop out points and then use that data to act in a more time intensive way. Some of that has to with really employing the kind of social media tools that are state of the art and very contemporary to push out information to students that we see are hitting vulnerable metrics. You know, like if you haven't been to class in 3 weeks, you know, how do we get a data set that tells all of your faculty, hey, this student hasn't been in class in 3 weeks, so that they have real-time data? That all requires investment. And I'll be looking forward to pursuing those investments when the conditions allow.
Thank you. Dr. Butler, any comments on that?
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. Rose. I like that. The stop out point, like I said, we've identified that at UNLV thanks to the help of decision support. It's something happening in that 4th and 5th year, but utilizing data to inform decisions is research being conducted on really that social and academic integration into the campus. And what it's showing, like similar to other institutions, is that students of colors are not involved on campus. So they're not working part-time on campus. They're not involving themselves in research, clubs and associations that we know lend to the persistence of all students. And so I think that that is another area, again, where we have all the pieces of the puzzle. It's just reorganizing it to a picture of student success and figuring out different ways, starting, which I also agree is PK, starting way in the beginning of their educational career. So by the time they end up at an INCHE institution, they already have a clear pathway again to their academic and career success. I think another area that INCHE is doing a great job, again, just to mention, is that remedial support and really giving students that hands-on co-rec support to break through that math and English barrier. As a student myself, was a TRIO student, overcame remediation classes. It is very key, which we've heard throughout the course of the summit, is having faculty and staff that look like you, that you can mirror yourself against, and who you can become in the future. And I think that, again, the state of Nevada, we're on the right track to bringing together all of our resources to help close the achievement gap.
Thank you. Brian or Jaime from the workforce world, what do y'all add to this?
For me, nothing to add. I think my colleagues did a great job. Jose, just to, I think, agree that there's a lot of work pushing in the right direction, and we hope to build on that.
Thank you. Brian?
I wouldn't add anything else. I think it's been great.
Thank you. So another question that came in was the issue of leadership, and how do we engage diverse leadership in the process of development and training and moving them into those leadership roles to ensure that there is representation of diversity at all levels?
I think that I'll go first, but I think the chancellor probably can do a better job than me. But I look at the presidents of the institutions here in Southern Nevada, and it's very obvious, right? President Whitfield, President Zaragoza. I know in my organization, I'm a leader Latino, and so the superintendent of the school district, So I think there's, again, we're making progress in that regard. It hasn't always been that way. So I'm grateful that that is happening. But I know the chancellor probably can expand on that.
Thanks, Jaime. You know, I think that higher education as an industry doesn't do a great job growing its own leadership. It's just, for whatever reason, not part of our culture in the way that it should be, at least not in my experience in the industry. And so, you know, one of the things I was really proud to be part of when I was chancellor in the state of Oregon is at the system level, we actually had an annual faculty chairs training in the summer. And the goal of this training, because that's oftentimes the first management position that a faculty member coming up the ranks will experience. And sometimes making that transition between a rank and file faculty member and being part of management can be a real challenge. And previously in higher ed, we've just thought, oh, it's just part of your advancement, you know, who needs training? Well, that leaves people behind, and that leaves really talented people without the supports that they need and deserve. And so in Oregon, we initiated this statewide, which really helped prepare the academic leadership of the future, right? Those people go on to be deans, provosts, presidents, and chancellors. And, you know, again, it's only about my 95th day on the job, but I would love to bring something like that program to the state of Nevada so that we're being very, very intentional about growing our own leadership, and being very intentional about whose leadership we're growing, and doing that with an equity lens, I think is just vital.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. Well, with that being said, we're at the end of our window. I just quickly make some closing comments. First, thank you to Jaime, to Dr. Rose, to Dr. Butler, and to Brian for your participation in this session. There were some critical things that were pointed out: in intentionality, advocacy, understanding that cultural relevance, cultural competence, cultural humility, all of those are critical as we think about the direction for higher education in Nevada, supporting our diversity and equity students, faculty, and staff. We all have a critical role, our community partnerships, a critical role. Some of the things that really stood out were the issue of career pathways. You know, there has to be real intentionality about finding and meeting students where they are, and then moving them in the direction of where those opportunities are and preparing them with that. So with that being said, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the folks who submitted some of the questions. The last one, again, I'll close with this. Culture does really make an impact on attitudes, not just Hispanics, but all diversity and equity populations. So let's remember that as we move forward, and continue our work in these areas to address the achievement gap in higher education in Nevada. Thank you, everybody, and I think we'll sign off for now. Bye, everybody.